can see it.
All right, good evening, everybody. You might grab your Bibles and turn to Numbers chapter 10. That's where we're ready for, right? Numbers 10. And we will pick up in the middle of the chapter in just a moment. Let me begin by just quickly summarizing how we've gotten to this point. The children of Israel have been at Mount Sinai by the time we get to Numbers chapter 10 and verse 11. They have been there for right at a year. Let's see. So they arrive at Mount Sinai in the first year, third month of the first year. So they leave Egypt first month, make it to Mount Sinai by the third month. They spend all of that year receiving the law, making preparations on the tabernacle, getting all of that ready, all of the furniture for the tabernacle ready. And on the first day of the first month of year 2, the tabernacle is set up. Now, from that day until the 14th day of the first month, they're going through the process of consecrating the priests. The tribes are bringing their offerings for the tabernacle and for its service. And then on the 14th day of the first month, they will have really the second observance of the Passover. The first Passover was the Passover on which the firstborn were killed in Egypt and that drove them out of slavery. This will be kind of the second Passover, but it's the first memorial of the Passover that will be observed on the 14th day of the first month. Now, through that second month, they will be making all of the preparations to be ready to move. The census, the organization of the camp, the ordering of their march and all of that is going to be set up so that on the 20th day of the second month of the second year, they will be ready to leave. So we've been out of Egypt for just about a year and, a year and a month. And then we've been at Sinai for almost a year, 20th month, the third month, all the way to the 20th day of the second month of the second year. The reason I refer to them like that is because of really that's how they refer to them in the scripture. Those months have names, but I don't know those names. So that's why I call it month 1 and month 2 instead of saying like Nisan or whatever else. Nisan is one of them, but I don't know which one that is. So anyway, all right. Anything as far as leading up to that? One thing, this is not in the schedule. I think it was supposed to be in the schedule. I think I left it off. But the signals for leaving, have we talked about that at all? Okay. I'll just mention this very quickly. The end of chapter 9, so chapter 9, 15 to the end, and the beginning of chapter 10 give us 2 sets of signals. A cloud, which I assume was white, and trumpets, which I know were silver, because it tells us it. That's why I've got white and silver. And so the cloud, when it ascends from off the tabernacle, what does that mean the people are supposed to do? It's time for them to move, right? And when it settles, when it descends, then what? They stay. That is how God gives His instructions about when to stay and when to go. And so it will talk about it in the end of chapter 9. It will say several times, at the command of the Lord, at the command of the Lord. Really, what Numbers 9 is I think it's Moses writing after having been in the wilderness for 40 years, right? Because this experience has not happened yet. But he's writing it and he says, if they stayed in a place 2 days, or if they stayed in a place a week, or if they stayed in a place a month, when it settled, they stopped, and then when it came up, they went. Well, he's telling that from the perspective of maybe 40 years later, having seen this process happen over and over. But they tell it to us right here in Numbers chapter 9 because that's in preparation for them getting ready to move. The trumpets will also have a role in them moving. And somebody says, well, they already know when to move because the cloud goes up or comes back down. Why do they need the trumpets? I think the trumpets, at least as based on the text, is when does each group set out. So the east, they'll do a trumpet blast, and the eastern groups will set out. They'll do a trumpet blast, and the south will set out. So it's not as simple as when the cloud goes. Yes, when the cloud goes, now they start moving. But you got to have an organization to this, and so that's what the trumpet blasts are. Trumpets also served other purposes, to call the congregation together, to call the leaders together, to prepare for war. and there was a trumpet blast over the sacrifices. And all of that is explained more so in Numbers chapter 10, but that's probably enough for us to move forward so that we can get to the material that's actually in the curriculum for tonight. Yes, that's exactly right. So we're talking, I mean, we've figured out the numbers before. We're potentially talking about 2 million people or more, right? So fighting men, 20 years old and upward, 603,550. So you triple that for women and then children, and we're looking at 1.8 or 2 million people. And so it would be a lot of people.
I would think the trumpets are necessary because there's so many people spread out.
That's probably right.
And they could hear it, I guess. Mm-hmm. You know, a trumpet's pretty loud.
Yeah, and there's a couple of things mentioned about those trumpets. This is chapter 10. I have them quoted up here. You will be remembered before the Lord your God, and you shall be saved from before your enemies. Or it will be a reminder of you before your God. God doesn't forget, but the trumpets are a reminder. They are a perpetual statute. And when the Lord hears the trumpets, he acknowledges or is reminded of or, sees that his people remember. And I think maybe that's what it is, the promises that he's made. When I talked through this last time, Lonnie made the point that at Mount Sinai, when the Lord spoke, it was the sound of trumpets. Now, I don't think that means that they were playing trumpets. I think it means that when the Lord came down on the mountain, it was the sound of trumpet, and he made a connection there. And that may very well be the case, that this is somehow reminiscent of the Lord's presence among them. And so it will be a reminder for them and for the Lord in that way. Okay, anything else? So now that brings us to Numbers chapter 10 and verse 10. That has been 52 and a half chapters at Mount Sinai. That's a lot. So that's from Exodus 19 to the end of Exodus, all the book of Leviticus, and the first 10 and a half chapters of Numbers, all at the foot of Mount Sinai, and the people are ready to set out. All right, you want to take us from there?
In chapter 10 and verse 11, we'll begin there. Now it came to pass on the 20th day of the second month, in the second year, that the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle of the testimony. And the children of Israel set out from the wilderness of Sinai on their journeys. Then the cloud settled down in the wilderness of Paran. So they started out for the first time, according to the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. And so Judah has set out first. If you'll notice. Verse 14, the standard of the camp of the children of Judah set out first according to their armies. Over their army was Nahshon, the son of Amminadab. Over the army of the tribe of the children of Issachar was Nathaniel, the son of Zuar. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Zebulun was Eliab, the son of Helon. And so this is the first group of people that were always to move first. Which side of the tabernacle were they camped on? It was the front entrance, and the front entrance was the east side. So this is the three tribes here that set out first. And in verse 17, it says, is that where I got to?
Yes, sir.
Then the tabernacle was taken down, and the sons of Gershon and the sons of Merari set out carrying the tabernacle. So who were the sons of Gershon and Merari? They were the priests, right? Where did they, the tabernacle was taken down probably already. And so they were the ones who were to carry the tabernacle. And they're not the priest. I'm sorry. I was wrong. They are the Levites that carry the tabernacle, the disassembled tabernacle. And when you read on, and it says, and the standard of the camp of Reuben set out according to their armies. Over their army was Elizur, the son of Shedeur. Over the army of the tribe of children of Simeon was Shelumiel, the son of Zerushadai. And over the army of the tribe of the children of Gad was Elisaph, the son of Duel. Okay, and so the following them was the camp of Reuben here. And so it lists those three, and they're on the south side of the tabernacle. And going back to the people who carried the tabernacle, there were two clans, and they went ahead of the Kohathites so that they could have the tabernacle set up before the Kohathites arrived with the furniture later on. And so that gets us through verse 20. Go ahead.
Yeah, and then so that take the Kohathites, and I think I have a chart of the marching order. If we that takes us a little bit back. Let's see. There we go. So from the bottom up is kind of how it would go. The ark would go ahead. Moses and Aaron, the sons, would go. Then Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, then Levi, but specifically Gershon and Merari. You got Reuben, Simeon, and Gad. Then the Kohathites. That takes us to verse 21, and then following behind them, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. And if I remember correctly, so it goes the eastern, then the southern, then the western side, then the northern side, right? And so Dan and Asher and Naphtali would be on the northern side of the tabernacle, but they're going to kind of fall in behind at the end as they march out. Okay, let's.
Did I make a mistake?
I don't think so.
Okay, the Merarites and Gershites are the priestly tribe, right?
Well, they are Levites,
Yes.
and then so let's see. Aaron's. I have a chart on this somewhere. Aaron and his sons are the priests.
Are the priests, right?
So
okay,
Gershon, Merari, and Kohath are Levites, but not priests.
I've confused myself.
Yeah, that's all right. Now, Aaron is from a line of Levi, but I don't remember what his grandfather's name was. I can look at that.
The priests start with Aaron.
The priests start with Aaron. That's exactly right. So yes. Yeah, so he may have been he may have been a grandson of Gershon or Merari or Kohath or whatever, but he's the only priest that's coming from him. Now, he's the high priest, and then there will be a specific line of high priests, but all the other sons will be priests as well.
It'd be Moses' father and
Well, that'd be Amram and Jochebed.
brothers.
Yes, that is correct. Yes. So, yes, that's right. Anybody who was of the tribe of Levi that wasn't Aaron or his sons is going to be a Levite, and they're going to be divided into three houses. And so you've got those three there. So no, I think we're good, right? Okay. Now it says this is verse 29 and following. We have Moses' conversation. He's called Hobab here. Anybody know what he's called in other places?
His father?
His father-in-law.
You say he's called Hobab here?
Is he not called Hobab in the text?
It's Hobab, yeah.
And then Jethro.
It's Jethro, yeah, but Jethro's the son of Ruel. Yeah. So, yeah, that's Exodus 18. We have a similar conversation that takes place between Jethro and Moses. This one's between Hobab and Moses. It's the same guy. It just has a different name. Let me work through some of this. Now, the conversation here is about whether or not Hobab is going to stay. Now, we're going to have some more information in chapter 11 about a recommendation that Jethro had made back in Exodus 18. But anyway, So Moses' father-in-law is going to leave, and what does Moses try to convince him to do? Come with him. Why? What does he say is going to happen if Jethro stays with Hobab stays with him? He'll be blessed, right? Because God has said, I'm going to do you good. He's taking us to a good land. Yahweh has promised good concerning Israel. And he says, no, I'm going to go. And then Moses says in verse 31, please do not leave us, inasmuch as you know where we should camp in the wilderness, and you will be as eyes for us. Hobab was a Midianite, right? Which all of this territory here would be Midian. And so I think what Moses is saying is you would have better familiarity with this territory than we would have. And so he says, it will be, if you go with us, that whatever good Yahweh does for us, we will do for you. It is interesting to me, and we're going to note this in just a second. Moses is confident of the goodness of God toward Israel and towards those who are with Israel. Because God has promised, I will bless you, and I will bless those who bless you, to Abraham and to his descendants. So Moses is confident of God's goodness to Israel and of his faithfulness to his promises, so much so that he would convince his father-in-law to stay on the basis that, listen, you want to be around when things happen here, because it's going to be good things. And then verse 33, they set out from the Mount of Yahweh 3 days' journey. I don't know that this only took them 3 days. I think this was a 3 days journey under normal circumstances. It could have been with a group of a couple million people that this is far further than what would have typically been a 3 days journey, maybe just for one person traveling on their own. But anyway, with the Ark of the Covenant of Yahweh journeying in front of them for 3 days to spy out a resting place for them. Now the cloud of Yahweh was over them by day when they set out from the camp. And I love this in verse 35. It happened when the ark set out that Moses said, rise up, O Lord, or O Yahweh, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those who hate you flee before you. And when it came to rest, he said, return, O Yahweh, to the myriad thousands of Israel. Again, notice the confidence that Moses places in God. When the cloud goes up, he says, drive the enemies out of your way. And when the cloud settles, return, be with us, let your presence be with us. I want to notice the contrast between the goodness that Moses is convinced of God's purposes for Israel, and their response in chapter 11, which is going to be in direct contrast to Moses' confidence in God's goodness. All right, Mr. Dwight, anything through all that?
No.
All right, anybody else through 36? Okay, Mr. Dwight, I'm going to take us through chapter 11.
Now when the people complained, it displeased the Lord, for the Lord Lord heard it, and his anger was aroused. So the fire of the Lord burned among them and consumed some of in the outskirts of the camp. And so only 3 days into the journey, the Israelites began to complain, and God was angry. It aroused him. And what happened to some of the people? They did. It wasn't total destruction, but they realized they'd made a big mistake, I believe. Then the people cried out to Moses, and when Moses prayed to the Lord, the fire was quenched. So he called the name of the place to Taberah, because the fire of the Lord was burned among them. That's what the name Taberah means. It means burning. And so that's the reason he named it that. It's a good lesson about murmuring and complaining, isn't it? We see how God feels about that. In verse 4, now the mixed multitude who were among them yielded to the intense craving. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, who will give us meat to eat? So this mixed multitude, who do you think they were? It was not the Israelites or the Hebrews.
Egypt came
Yes.
along with them that were asked to come if they wanted to.
Yeah, they followed them out when they left hastily, didn't they? And but they were the reason for much of the problems that the children of Israel had. But there was, what were they complaining for?
Food they had to eat, the fish.
Yes, what type of food in particular? Meat, right? In verse 5, he says, "We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. But now our whole being is dried up. There is nothing at all except this manna before our eyes." And it just describes the manna there. It was like coriander seed, and its color like the color of bdellium. And so they weren't showing appreciation for what God has done for them. And of course, this is the reason that God was angry with them. Now, in verse 8, the people went about and gathered it, ground it on millstones, or beat it in the mortar, cooked it in pans, and made cakes of it. And its taste was like the taste of pastry prepared with oil. And when the dew fell on the camp in the night, the manna fell on it. And so it just describes what this manna was like. And in verse 10, then Moses heard the people weeping throughout their families, everyone at the door of his tent, and the anger of the Lord was greatly aroused. Moses also was displeased. And so Moses and the Lord are angry, aren't they, at the people? And let's see what Moses' reaction is. So Moses said to the Lord, "Why have you afflicted your servant? And why have I not found favor in your sight, that you have laid the burden of all these people on me? Did I conceive all these people? Did I beget them, that you should say to me, carry them in your bosom as a guardian carries a nursing child to the land which you swore to their fathers? Where am I to get meat and give to these people? For they weep all over me, saying, give us meat that we may eat. I am not able to bear all these people alone, because the burden is too heavy for me. If you treat me like this, please kill me here and now, if I have found favor in your sight, and do not let me see my wretchedness." And so we see Moses' reaction and how he actually feels here. He's really wanting God to end this, isn't he? And how is he wanting God to end it? In him, right? he just wants to be taken away from it, doesn't he? And so isn't that like people today? They are not satisfied with the blessings that God has given them, and so they want something different, right? And would you like to make some comments on this?
Well, just one thing, like you're making mention there, in this case, there had been a case previously where they complained because they didn't have food. This is a case of they didn't have a variety of food, and that's a different kind of complaint. I'm not saying that it would be ideal to eat the same thing every day. I do know that the Psalms, Psalm 78:25, says that men ate the bread of angels. I don't know that angels have to eat, but that's what Psalm 78 calls. You know, you would think that if you had to eat the same thing every day, that the bread of angels would be the ideal thing to have to eat every day. The grain of heaven, I think verse 24 calls it, the bread of angels. And the thing that is interesting, so in Exodus 16, 17, 18, remember they had complained about a lack of food, and they had complained about a lack of water. And did God consume them with fire in those places? No. So why not then, and why this time?
Well, they actually had food. Prior to them, they didn't have.
Yeah, okay, so they didn't have anything, that's right.
And
Yeah.
and they complained to the point that it made God angry, because here he is. They didn't have nothing, and I mean thousands and thousands of people there,
That's right.
and he's feeding them every day, and then bam.
Yeah.
They're wanting to be back in Egypt.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
they're also looking at contempt on the things that God's given.
Yes.
So they said, we have nothing but this manna. And it's like, well, God's graciously given.
Yes. It's not just like, hey, we don't have anything. It's you're giving us something and it's not good enough. And that's bad. Maybe one thing is that maybe they could be excused for complaining when they're out in the wilderness and they have not seen how God can provide. They know that God can provide at this point. They know that He will provide whatever they need. He'll take care. They have had for a year now bread fall every day. And maybe the most insulting part of it is when they talk about all the things they have in Egypt. The English Standard Version, it says all the things we had in Egypt that cost nothing. It didn't cost nothing. It cost slavery, right? Now, did they have to pay for it when they were getting it? I guess not. But they had to work under the cruel and harsh slavery of the Egyptians, and they say, well, at least it was free. It's like, man, if you give people a sandwich, they'll just remember you fondly, even if you just, abuse them, which is what happened. You read about Exodus 1 and Exodus 2, where they were under this harsh system, and they cry out to God for deliverance. The leeks and the onions they weren't satisfying you then. But now that they're out and being provided for, and so it's really a spit in the face to God. In Exodus 16, 17, 18, it was maybe a lack of trust, but I don't think it was to the same degree that it was here, where they spit at the gifts that God has given. They remember fondly the bonds of Egypt, and they complain. And it was the rabble instigating this, but the people of Israel should have said, all right, that's enough of that, rabble, right? But what they do is they just fall right into line. Moses has to intercede for them in the first place, which we have seen Moses do already. And by the way, we ate freely. How much did the manna cost? It didn't cost a dime either. They were able to just go out and get it. And anyway, so all that is to say is that it is, I think there are lots of reasons why God's anger is raised here in a way that maybe it wasn't the first time they're complaining. That this was a lesson they should have learned. They should have learned that they could trust the Lord. And they certainly shouldn't have despised His gifts in this way. So I think that takes us down to about, and then Moses, he says, if you're not going to help, if there's not going to be some way to help bear this burden, just kill me. Any thoughts through 15 that you all would like to share?
Would they not starve without
Oh,
the
yeah. Yeah, they would have died.
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe you've already answered this. I missed it. So in 1 through 3,
Yes.
and then starting verse 4, are those two separate occurrences, or is 1 through 3 kind of setting up, hey, here's generally speaking what happened overall, and then 4 is like the specific thing they're complaining about?
Yeah, I think their misfortunes in verse 1 is what mine says, or their calamity. I think the New American Standard says. Is there another word for they complained about what in verse 1? What does your text say? 11 verse 1. They complained about their misfortune. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Hardship. Yeah. Yeah. So I think hardship is maybe more general or broad, and then specifically one of the things they were complaining about was the lack of meat. But the burning happens maybe even before the complaint about the meat specifically.
You think some of the complaint comes up because they have these animals with them in some area of the camp.
Yeah. You think like the sacrificial
The
animals.
sacrificial animals, and they think, why can't we have some of that? And
Maybe.
maybe that's some of what comes up.
Yeah.
That's just a thought.
Yeah. I don't know. That's perhaps. Because they've made, yeah. Yeah, and so that's another thing. It can't be that they have no meat whatsoever. Because they eat some of it when they make the sacrifices. And so maybe it's just they don't have as much as they would like to have. And so that makes the complaint even worse. That they do have some animals because they brought a huge contribution of animals and all this, oxen and all that, which I assume they could eat. But yeah, I mean that maybe enhances the degree of the complaint, and maybe some of it is the kind of not appreciating the fact that these other animals are reserved for sacrificial purposes. But I don't know if there was just a huge holding of sacrificial animals, because for the most part they just got. I mean, there would be some because they had to offer a morning and evening sacrifice. So there were some just like tabernacle owned stockyards, but I don't know. You would imagine the people have some animals as well because they're having to bring them, and the fact that they're still complaining about not having enough meat makes it even worse. It's just the fish meat that they miss. Okay. They don't get fish.
The biggest thing that keeps cropping up. I mean, this is all a prelude that when they actually get and send the spies.
Yeah, that's right.
They don't trust God.
That is it.
They only trust man's knowledge
Yes.
and what they can do. And they've done seen more than any country or group of people. I mean, how many has ever come out of Egypt under Pharaoh and then all his whole army was destroyed by what?
Just them. So yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, so they've experienced more of the blessings of God than anybody else, and they're complaining. But far be it from us to do such a thing.
I want to ask a question.
Yes.
Maybe I missed it somewhere. Was manna all they were allowed to eat?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think they could have eaten whatever else they wanted if it was available. I just think, I mean, you've seen pictures of like at the foot of Mount Sinai, pretty dry and desolate, and would get more so as they head north towards Canaan until they get to Canaan. So I don't know. I don't think it was all they were allowed to eat, but was there something else?
Well, in verse 4, the English Standard says they had strong craving,
Yeah.
but the King James says they fell a lusting.
Yeah. Other translations say things like they had greedy desires and things like that. So, which demonstrates that your lust or greed for anything can be oriented in a bad way, right? Cause you complain and cause you not to trust God.
You think this would have looked completely different if they would have petitioned God for variety as opposed to complaining and murmuring?
Yeah. I mean, there's no indication anywhere that God begrudged the petitions of his people. And even when he talks about the way he's going to bless them when they get into the land, he says there's going to be an abundance there. And that maybe that's another thing that makes this so insulting is God has already said, listen, when you get in the land, I know you don't have everything right now, but when you get in the land, it will literally overflow for you. But we can't wait that long, right? So it is a failure of perspective. They really forget where they came from and they forget where they're going. And so all they can see is 6 inches in front of their face. And what they see 6 inches in front of their face is just manna. And that's not good enough. But if they thought about, the leeks and onions, they actually did carry quite a heavy cost. And milk and honey is going to be bountiful. Then only eating manna for right now is not going to be that big a deal. But they get caught up in their circumstances rather than in remembering what God has done in the past and remembering what God's planning to do for them. Maybe. He's about to give a quail.
But he did give him 12.
Oh, okay.
When he first gave him, he gave him 12.
At the same time. Okay.
But with that made it.
Yeah.
But it sounds like they're not able to eat meat, because it said, who will give us meat to eat?
Yeah.
And they remembered all they had before. Now our whole meat is dried up. There's nothing at all except the manna for our
Yeah.
Do you think if they started eating the foot of the meat, they would use it for sacrifices for that many people, it would have been gone?
Yeah, maybe. They can only offer the specific ones for the sacrifices. It's not the whole range of animals that they can offer. But it may be simply a frustration that God is not providing that for them. That somehow, he's providing this bread, but if he can do that, can he do more? And that may be the sense of it here. I don't know. But anyway.
They refer to it later on as worthless bread.
Yeah.
They just, I think they just don't appreciate what God's
If
done
you're
for
starving to death, it's not worthless, right? It's worth, if you eat it, it's worth something. I have to think, I say I have to think, when they say nothing but this manna to look at, I assume that where they are in the wilderness, the thing that's available is the manna. Now, there may be animals, but like some of you are saying, with the number of people, if you start eating these animals here in the wilderness, the animals don't have a ton to eat either, right? They're probably on bare minimum number of animals. So it's not like you can eat them, because then you won't have any when you make it to the land to get settled down. So I think it probably is. It's not that there are no animals around, it's that there's none that are good, that are available to eat. Because I think probably in most places, especially that nomadic, you don't really eat your animals. You take the milk and you take the wool or whatever, and if you eat an animal, and that is, it stopped giving whatever it's going to give. Whereas, if you keep it alive, it can give a lot more. And you don't just kill an animal just because you're hungry for meat. So maybe that's what they were thinking is, God ought to be providing this for us because we don't have enough here. But anyway, so having said all of that, the Lord is going to respond to these complaints. I don't know if Moses is a complaint. And I don't, maybe there's a little bit of frustration in it, but God's going to respond to that as well. And the response is basically to follow the pattern that Jethro had given back in Exodus 18 about putting other men in place to help handle some of the burden for Moses. I don't think that what we have here is maybe a separate, I think these may very well be the same guys that were selected in that process. But here God is going to endow them with gifts and with power to help them help Moses. And so that's going to be part of the relief of the burden for Moses. I don't know. Look at, and I'll just go through this quickly. In verse 17, they're going to go down to the tent of meeting. And I will take some of the spirit that is on you and put it on them, and they shall bear the burden of the people with you, so that you may not bear it yourself alone. And say to the people, consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, and you shall eat meat. For you have wept in the hearing of the Lord, saying, who will give us meat to eat? For it was better for us in Egypt. God heard that part, right? He noticed that. Therefore the Lord will give you meat, and you shall eat. You shall not just eat 1 day, or 2 days, or 5 days, or 10 days, or 20 days, but a whole month, until it comes out at your nostrils and becomes loathsome to you, because you have rejected the Lord who is among you, and have wept before him, saying, why did we come out of Egypt? You see, their complaint was more than about what the variety of food. It was saying basically that God had failed to provide for them as he needed to. And so Moses, maybe even here, is a little bit incredulous. Can't believe that God's going to be able to, where are we going to get enough meat? Sounds like the disciples. Where are we going to get it? Where are we going to get enough food for all these people? And the Lord said to Moses, this is verse 23, is the Lord's hand shortened? Now you shall see whether my word will come true or not. Now we'll have to pick up on the meat in just a second. But we have this, the Spirit comes down, these elders, they begin to prophesy. And what does this prophecy indicate?
God's approval.
Yeah, I think God's approval, that they are empowered by God. Notice it says at the end of verse 25 that they did not continue on prophesying. So this was kind of a moment that shows these people have God's Spirit on them, and then evidently that ends. Now there are 2 other guys, Eldad and Medad, who are not with the main group at the tent of meeting. I don't know why they're not, but they are prophesying, and who gets upset about that? Joshua, yeah. Now why is he upset? Moses says in verse 29, go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, Moses says that he says, are you jealous for my sake?
Yeah. Here it seems that Joshua is saying, no, I know who the one who the Lord speaks through, and that's Moses. And these other guys, I think he thinks they're being presumptuous and taking some of the right or the authority or the glory from Moses, and Joshua's upset about that, which is, you can commend that. But Moses says, would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his Spirit on them. Moses, and this is going to go to something in chapter 12 that we may not have a ton of time to get to, but Moses is not power hungry. He is not, he's not jealous for his own power. He's not jealous for his own sake. Joshua's jealous for his sake, but Moses is not. And his idea is the more people that the Lord's speaking through, the better. And that's a good attitude for Bible teachers in any era to have. I know that some people maybe get frustrated and maybe, well, why are they getting these opportunities to teach and preach? And Paul would say, as long as Christ is preached, who cares? And that's basically what Moses is saying here. As long as it's the Lord speaking through them, it doesn't have to be me. And he's not jealous for his own sake in that way. All right, I know I took a lot there.
That's good. In the next chapter, verse 3, it says Moses was a very humble,
Yes.
more than all men who were on the face of the earth. So that's the characteristic that we all should have.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's interesting because it is not Moses shirking away from duty, right? Saying, well, I can't do that. He did do that at some points. But he has taken quite the role in teaching and leading the people. But when other people do that, he's not mad about that either. And so it's
Moses actually asked God for help.
yes, that's right.
And by him letting the men that's actually prophesying and these other two, it was to confirm that these people who are later on going to tell you what to do, that Moses is actually letting them do a lot of his work.
That's right.
It's not that they just doing it upon their own. Their voice of power comes from God.
Yes, very good. You want to take us to the end of
Yes.
the chapter there?
Now a wind went out from the Lord, and it brought quail from the sea, and left them fluttering near the camp, about a day's journey on this side, and about a day's journey on the other side, all around the camp, and about 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. And the people stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day, and gathered the quail. He who gathered least gathered 10 homers, and they spread them out for themselves all around the camp. But while the meat was still between their teeth, before it was chewed, the wrath of the Lord was aroused against the people. And the Lord struck the people with a very great plague. So he called the name of that place Kibroth Hattaavah, because there they buried the people who had been yielding to craving. And so we see the Lord fulfills his promise to feed them meat here, doesn't he? He causes a wind to blow from the sea, and it brings a whole lot of quail in. And it was so much quail, and they were low to the ground, right? They were about 3 feet up from the ground, where they could just reach them and grab them and pile them up, or collect them. And so this was, of course, the divine power of God here. And 10 omers, the least it says gathered 10 omers. Do you know how much that is?
My Bible says 65 bushels, which is very helpful.
Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 6 bushels. Yeah,
20 liters.
how much
220 liters.
for 1 omer? Right, so I think it's 2,200 liters total. Somebody said it was like 9.5 55-gallon drums. That was
Yeah.
500 gallons. Yeah, yes,
That's
right.
more, we can relate to that.
That's right.
55-gallon drums.
Yeah, 9 or 10 of them. So that's a
Yes.
Yeah. That is a 12-mile radius, which is about a day's journey from the camp in both directions. So there's quail 3 feet off the ground, but not literally here, but that's what it would be like. That's a lot of quail, right? Covering that whole radius. So he struck them dead while it's still between their teeth. There are some powerful images in this, like coming out through their nose, killing them while it's in between their teeth. Some visceral images.
I believe that he did that because instead of just going to that
Right.
way,
Yeah.
they were so greedy
Yeah.
with increase, they just tried to get all that they could
Yeah.
get. And he struck them.
Yeah, so they're traveling, right? They're not staying here forever. They're headed to the land of Canaan, and they're getting 55-gallon drums. How are they going to carry all that? See, they've lost sight of where they're headed and what they're doing. Okay.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, Please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.